Hi everyone, Bob here from the Tech Leads. Today is the day. The deep dive on the block editor starts now. Okay, gonna jump right in here just to catch everyone up. The last couple videos. First video, we installed the WAMP server so that you can run WordPress locally with my SQL server. A couple other products in that mix there that get installed with WAMP. So now we have a local version of WordPress running. We've already upgraded it to version 6.8. And then the second video, we kind of went through all the different settings, showed what the typical settings should be. Make sure that you're built for performance from the get-go. And then the last video, we showed some of the plugins that we typically install for a production site. Small, easy, affordable. The one I didn't add in the last video, I kind of forgot, was Slim SEO, which I'll do an episode around that one later. It's another Jackson tip. Really, in fact, for me, it's the only SEO plugin I even use anymore. So, Rank Math, Yoast, all the big ones out there. Nothing wrong with them, of course, but there's some things in the Slim SEO. Number one, it's really small, it's really compact, but just the way it gives you access to the metadata for each page you have and lets you control some of those settings, does a lot of the automation for you as well. It's a slick little SEO plugin for you. So a couple things we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive into the editor real quick. We've only got 2 pages still, so we renamed our sample page to the home page, so we're going to do some testing with that today. The other thing that we'll mention is that we did put the Ollie theme in here, so we're running Ollie now. That is our the theme that we've already kind of installed. I think I might have even done an update since our last video. So we've got WAMP server, we've got the Ollie theme, we've got our base plugins put in, we've got one page built essentially to get started other than our privacy page, which is already there. And now we're going to jump right into the editor. The first thing I wanted to talk about though is my setup, a little bit about the workflow that I use, and the 3 tabs that I'm almost always going to have open when I'm doing page editing. So the first tab I'm going to leave on the main menu so that I'm not bouncing back and forth from the editor into the menu. If I want to go and change something in the settings, if I want to do something in any of my plugins, if I have to add somebody into the user group, or whatever the case may be, even, especially with the custom code in JS, I typically will have this set up for coding, and I'll have my editor ready to go and actually start working on pages, okay? So the idea here is that I'm not bouncing back and forth between the menu and the editor. And the last page I'm gonna have is the actual finished site, okay? So one of the things you'll find out about the block editor early on, and I promise you, it will drive you nuts. The editor for block editor is not what you see is what you get. It is what you see is not what you get. So you have to be very careful. You can sometimes chase a little setting and a block someplace where you see that there's some extra padding in there, or there's some margin between the menu and your hero portion of the page, and it will drive you bonkers trying to figure out where that is set. You can run around in circles forever. I'm going to show you how to kind of take care of a lot of that stuff in your initial setup. But the idea is that if you really want to see how your page looks, you have to go and actually view the page instead of viewing it through the editor screen, okay? So it gives you a good idea of what that page is going to look like. But if you start seeing little anomalies in the page where you don't expect to see it, especially if you're doing something with a plugin where the page just doesn't present right, then go look at it on the regular view for with your browser, and you can go from there. And then I typically will, if I see something out of whack a little bit, I'll use the I'm a Firefox guy, so I'll go use the the debug tool for the browser, and then I can start sifting through the code, seeing where something might be set where I forgot it, or I need to go fix it, and I can do that right from here. Okay, so 3 tabs open: main menu, editor menu, and then the actual finished page. Okay, so we're going to jump into the editor now. The way you get into the editor is from the main menu. I'll back out here. So now I want to get into the editor. I'm going to go over to Appearance, and I'm just going to click on Editor. This is the only way you should get into the block editor or the full site editor, whatever we're going to call it. I don't ever go in from the page itself. I can go in and edit here. The only time I'll ever use this typically is if I want to change the name of the page. So for this one, you know, I would rename it and say Home Test Site. All right, just leave it at that. So I can change that here, but I'm going to back out. I'm not going to do any actual block editing from the Pages Edit screen. All right, I'm going to go from Appearance into Editor, and then I'll start from here. And what we're going to play with today is the global settings. You'll notice that I have a Styles menu item here that I can click on. I recommend that you don't use this approach. Just because you're kind of locked in on the page you have to use here, and you'll see that this is a blog page, right? So this is, you know, a blog post page, which we haven't even built yet. So you can kind of, you know, you can use this one if you're making a quick change or whatever, but I recommend that you go into the global settings from the Pages menu, and, you know, from that Pages, you'll start to see all of your, you know, as you add them, you'll start to see them all here. I just go and click on the pencil icon, and now I'm into the editor for that particular page. Okay, I'll typically also go and expand the list view. So this is how I typically am going to move around blocks and add blocks from this view in here. And then over here, I've got another couple menu items. I can see the page name up here. I can redo and undo over here. Also use Control Z and Control Y, which I recommend you get good at the keystrokes. It'll save you time and save you effort. And then you have the ability to go view the page here. So if I want to go spin up the home page, I can do that right here. So I'll move that around, get it to the size I want, stretch it out. You can kind of see how it moves as you're, you know, building a responsive website. So we're going to put this back on desktop. It's typically how I develop. The next icon is the wrench icon, which is for, you know, building themes yourself. So you got a lot of options here. This is from the plugin Create Block Theme that we added last week. So you can either save changes to your theme, you can create new themes, you can edit the metadata, you can create a blank theme from here. So if you want to, you know, build your own themes, you can start doing that, or you can create child themes, or, you know, clone a theme from here as well, right? So tons of great options. We're going to get into some of this a little bit later once we get through some of the initial design approaches that you can kind of go through with the block editor. So we'll get there eventually. And then the next icon is the circle with the half moon through it, and that is the global styles button. Okay, and there's a lot going on here. I recommend you start playing around with this first. So this is where I think you can really speed up your whole development approach. You can do a lot of things from here that will build consistency into your site, make things very easy for you so that you're not changing font sizes, you're not changing colors, you're not having to, you know, do a lot of editing work on the blocks that you're building into your page. So all of that will come from your default global settings once you go and do it correctly. So I'm going to go through all of that, show you how it works, show you what some of the gotchas are, because there's a couple of them. And again, you know, I think part of the reason the block editor drives so many people nuts is because of some of the little gotchas in here that will, you know, that will waste a lot of your time if you're not aware of how the tool works. Okay, and with a little bit of practice, you'll start getting it, and you'll figure it out quickly enough. All right, so you got a couple different things in here. You've got browse styles, so you can go pick, you know, a pattern. The thing I like about this view versus the other one from the design view is I can see things change as I start clicking around. All right, so I can see the colors start to change. I can change my typeset as well. So if I want, you know, different font sets, those are all built into the theme. So we'll dive into that here in a second. But, you know, if I want to start looking at different approaches to the look and feel at the theme level, I can do it from the browse styles here. Okay, I'm going to stick with the default style for now, and then we're going to start editing this to make it work for our particular design needs. Okay. So the first thing in the menu here that I recommend you start with is the typography. And just like the styles, you can go and pick your typesets, and then you can start playing around with your different fonts. Okay. So we've got a list of fonts here based on this typeset. If I start changing the typesets, you'll see that the fonts will also change. So the typeset is typically going to be a combination of a font or two, and it's your view into that font of what they're going to look like together, right? So I can tell by looking at some of these, preset number 6, that this is a serif capital font and a non-serif smaller, lowercase letter, right? So if I go and click on that typeset, I've got a serif font here, and I've got a sans serif font here as well. So that's typically how you're going to set up your fonts for a professional website. You're going to have one serif font that you're using for headings and maybe your body, and then you'll have a sans serif font for certain headings or other pieces of the page that you might want to use, and you can blend them back and forth. There's no real rule, but you'll figure out which tricks you like to use. Some people like different fonts in links, some people like different fonts on buttons. You've got a lot of different options for how you can blend the fonts into your website, and I'll show you kind of how all of that works. We're going to stick with the default, so we're just going to go with the base list of fonts that come with the Ollie theme and this default typeset, okay? But if I want to go play with different fonts, I can do that from here, and I can just look at different typesets and see what else is built into the theme, okay? And there's a bunch of them in here. So back to the default. And now let's say I don't want to use any of these fonts, and I don't, frankly, right? The Mono Sans, these guys aren't really my cup of tea, so I typically am going to go and install a couple of my own fonts depending on the type of site that I'm building or the customer needs, right? They may already have a website that's got a certain theme built in. They don't really want to change the look and feel, so I can kind of go and mix and match the fonts that they're using now, and I can do that through this interface over here, and it looks like the little equalizer setting. Click on that, and then you'll get this menu for choosing your fonts, and you can see there's variants for each one selected here. I have the ability to upload fonts. That's one way to do it, especially if you're doing some wild fonts. Maybe you're building a site for a race car team, right? Or a landscaping company, and there's some crazy tree font or whatever that you kind of want to build into the page, or some what do they call them? Wing bats, right? Or some other things that you kind of want to pull in. You can upload your own fonts. I just urge caution there, because you will have to, there is a price to pay for those fonts to load from the server to the people who are actually viewing that page. The better way to go about this is to install Google Fonts. All right, so I've already gone through the process of connecting this site back to Google Fonts. So now I can go through and find some fonts on Google that I can use. The benefit of using Google Fonts is that they're open source, number one. They're free to use, number two. And number three, they're globally distributed already on content delivery networks. So I don't have to upload them from anywhere. They're all available all over the world. So they're going to help your performance in the long run, just because the end users are either going to have them already built in to their browser and they're cached, or they're coming from a short distance from a content delivery node someplace that you're not going to pay a price performance-wise waiting for those fonts to load. So once you kind of have an idea of the fonts you're going to use, you'll notice that this is page 1 of 216. So there's literally thousands of fonts available in Google, right? I don't want to spend all day like sorting through different fonts. So there's a couple ways you can kind of go and pick good font pairs. ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, go play around with a couple of those. Ask them what are some good combo Google fonts for your particular site, right? So if you're doing a retail site and you're selling artwork or something like that, just go see what might be a good recommended pair of fonts to use for a site like that, and you get some really creative answers. All right, for me, I tend to build technical sites, for companies and people building their own websites. And there's a couple that I'm typically always going to use, right? And the first one is Merriweather. So an ode to Lord of the Rings fans, right? So I won't explain that one. If you know, you know. And then so Merriweather's going to be. Oh, I don't think I selected it. Merriweather is going to be my serif font. So let's go and install that. So now I've got Merriweather installed. And then my sans serif font for this one, I'm going to use Inter. And I'm going to install all the variants. Okay, so now I have 2 new fonts available to me in my list, all right? And you can see them right here. I've got Inter, I've got Merriweather, and you'll notice that now my save button is available. So I can go and save these settings, which I'll do. So I've updated my global settings, I've added some fonts, but here's one of the gotchas. So this is what you gotta be careful with. If I go and select a different typeset, just maybe I want to see what they look like, right? Let's give it a try. All right, that might look nice. If I go back to the default typeset, you'll notice that those fonts are now gone. They aren't really gone though, right? What's happened is that I've cleared the list of fonts, and I think this is, for me, this is a pet peeve with the block editor in WordPress. It doesn't keep the work that I've done here, even though I haven't saved from when I went and checked the other typeset, okay? So if you go through and start doing all these other settings that we're gonna share with you here, and then I just say, by the offhand, I wanna go look at a different typeset, I'm gonna lose all of that work if I go and hit that save button. So the way to back out of that work is to go back over to the WordPress icon on the top left, click it. You can now see that I've got one change in review. The only way that I've found that I can back out of that change is to go back to the dashboard. All right. So now that change is gone. Now I can go back into the editor. I can go back to my page. I can go back to the global settings, go back to typography, and you'll see my 2 fonts are now back and available to me, okay? So I got all my variants in there now. This is saved. The save button is no longer highlighted because I didn't save after I changed that typeset. But be aware, right? If you go and start looking at other, even the other styles in here, right? If I go and start browsing the styles, or I go and start changing colors, I'm going to reset the things that are in my current settings. All right, so now that I've got my 2 fonts added, now I can go and start setting defaults for the various elements of my page, right? So all of the text related settings, or the text related blocks are going to be affected by these global settings. So this is an opportunity for us to go add some more elements to the page so that we can get an idea of what the impact is of these changes. And this is really part of the block editor that I like, in that I can go and set up my environment. I can make changes to like a global setting, and I can see what the impact of those changes are going to be across different types of layouts. So I'm going to add, over on the top left, click the plus button. I'm going to add a pattern for my first set of blocks. The patterns are created with the theme, so these all exist as part of the Ollie theme. I'm going to click on the cards section, right? You can see they're all kind of organized in different ways here. I can go look at all of them. I can go look at different sections. We're going to add some to this list as we start going through and developing, because doesn't really have everything that we need. But there's one particular pattern in here that I like to use for setting up websites, and it's this one because it's got the button in it. All right, and I want to make sure that my button settings are universal throughout the entire site. All right, I don't want to be going and having one button look one way and another button look another. It just creates, you know, a look of unprofessionalism across the website, and I don't want to do that. All right, so now if I go back to my list view, you can see my pattern has dropped into my list, and now I can start moving that around if I want, or I can start playing around with it as well. Okay, I want to move this to the top though. I'm going to move it to the above this section here. Okay, and the way you do that is it takes 3 clicks, right? And it takes a little while to get used to this. It takes a little practice. So take 1, 2, and then 3, I can drag and drop this all the way to the top of the site. Okay, so real easy. If you want to move stuff around, 1, 2, 3, and away I go. Okay, and now I can reorder all the sections of my page very easily from here. Very easy to get stuff around, and you know, that's kind of how I typically will go and move whole sections of a page, just to kind of play around and see where different layouts might be. You know, very easy to show a customer different views. So, you know, you have, you know, one section of a page up front or whatever, or they say, hey, you know, could you move that one down? You can kind of do that right with them here. Go and save it. Go re-hit your page over here, and now you can kind of see you know, how your changes are looking on your final site. All right. So in addition to adding that pattern, I also want to add a bunch of headings. So I want to be able to see how the paragraphs are going to look, and I want to be able to see how all the different headings are going to look. And you have 6 different headings built in by default with this theme. So I'm going to add 6 different headings. You'll notice all I'm doing is clicking on the heading icon multiple times. So now I've got them all in my list. So I've got 6 different heading blocks. If I want to go and start editing them, I can do that right here. So this is my H1, but you'll notice this isn't set at H1 yet. If I want to set it at H1, I can do it right here from the floating menu. Okay. If I wanted to change it to a paragraph, I can also do that right here. Okay. So I can actually move stuff around, so I can change that, you know, to a different page element right from the menu. So instead of having to go and delete this and add another heading, I can do it right from the floating menu, which makes it really easy. Okay. So there's we're going to make this H1. We're going to make this one H2. Learning to spell. All right, there's H2. This one's going to be H3. H4. H5. And H6. Okay, and you'll notice I have a lot of variance here in my headings, right? I mean, H1's pretty big, 2's look kind of big, and then they, you know, there's almost no difference between the bottom 3, and that's one of the things we're going to want to change. All right, so that's kind of why I want to see what the impact is on my settings when I start making changes. So back over to my global styles button. Okay. Now I can go back into typography. I've still got my 2 fonts in there, right? My page is now updated, so I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. So now I can see it on my test site. You'll start getting used to this workflow, right? Make a change, go look at the change. And now I've got my typeset chosen. I've got my custom fonts installed and available to me. Now I can go and start setting the default for my page elements, okay? And the first one is the text element. And almost every block is going to have some component of text, right? So buttons are going to have text. Your links are going to have text. Your paragraphs are going to have text. Lists are going to have text. They're all going to use this default, okay? And this is the font that is chosen by default. We're going to move this to Merriweather. So our default font is now going to be a serif font called Merriweather. Okay, and the size for me is a little bit big, so I'm going to make that smaller. Okay, did you see that? See how much smaller I made that? Let's go extra small. It didn't seem to do much. Let's go medium. Nothing's changing. Why is that? Do you know why? Large. Well, it's changing in the cover element over here, but it's not changing in this column. The reason for that is that these blocks are not using the defaults. All right, so if I go over to my element style, you'll see that this paragraph is set to the small font, all right? So it's overriding the default. If I want it to use the default font, I got to go back and flip it to default. So this is what I mean by, building your site, trying to use the default settings instead of going custom, because once I go and start moving this to a different size, I'm now broken from the global style, okay? So to the degree that you can, always try to keep things at the default level, and that way you can change things at the global setting level. All right, so I'm going to get this one to small, and I'm going to get this one to small. Pet peeve, you'll notice that every time I choose a new block, it always sets me back to the page view, right? Or the first level of settings here. And you have to switch over to the style portion of, the editor, right? All right, so number 2 is going to be set to default. Number 3 is going to be set to default. All right, so now all of them are using the default sizes, okay? So let's go back to the global setting for typography. Now we're going to go back to that text setting where we've set the text size globally to large, and we want it to be small. Ta-da! All right, so now everything's changing in parallel. All right, I don't have to go and change font sizes anymore. In fact, I would say these fonts are still a little bit too big for me, so we're going to change that too. Okay, but a couple other things I can do here, right? I can play with, I don't know what the appearance. I don't know that that's going to benefit you much if you want to go bold or black. There's a couple different settings in here depending on the theme. I don't really change those. If I need keep getting that. If I need to bold something, I'll just do it right at the individual word or the paragraph. Okay, so I wouldn't do it there. And then line height you can change as well if this isn't enough for you. Let's go 1.5 again was our. So if I want to go add more line height here, I can do that. So if I want more space, so you got some capabilities here to set things by default, right? And if I don't want to set it here at the global level, I can always go and do it at the individual block level. I can also go and, if I want to get really crazy, I can make everything uppercase. I can make everything lowercase. Or no, nothing. Sorry. That's for the link. We'll have that over in a second. If I want to get really crazy, I can make everything uppercase. I can make everything lowercase. So you got some variability here, things you can do. All right. So that's pretty good for our text setting. I got it right where I want it. I could go a little bit smaller. Yeah, that looks good. Let's stay there. Okay. So that was my text. So now for links, same. It's already using the default text font. So let's go and create a link. So I create a link by highlighting the text I want to be pointing someplace, and then I have the icon here for creating a link. And then I'll just link to something, right? Now I've got a link on my site. And you can see that the link is underlined, right? I don't like that. I would rather links be either a different color or something else. So I'm going to turn off the underline. You'll notice I don't have the ability to change the color here. So I'll show you where that's done though. So we'll do that in another step. So links are done, right? If I wanted to make them a little bit bigger in size, I could do that. Okay, I could go off of the default. Don't recommend it, but if that's the way you want to go, you can do that. But right now you're going to see that it's going to use the default text size. So links are done. We go down to headings, and this is where some magic happens, all right? I like the headings for the most part. I'll typically go and mess with the sizes a little bit. And then for heading number 5, right? So first off, I want to make sure these are all going to use enter. So I'm going to make my headings for this site a sans serif font, okay? So I'm going to change the default font for headings to be enter for all. And if I wanted to change, if I wanted one font to be a different heading, I could do that here as well, okay? So I can go a little bit off the beaten path with my headings. For me, I don't really mess with that so much. I keep them all the same font. It's the H5 heading where I'll typically go and, maybe change the size a little bit, right? So bring the size up. And then what I want to do is I want to make it all capitals. And then I'm going to add a little page spacing between them. So it's just a nice little effect for, the very top of your page. You can change the color a little bit. And then they become it's just a nice way to kind of split up text on a site. Okay, so all done there. So we've got headings done. We've got links are done. Text is done. I don't really mess much with captions. I don't do a lot with images. But buttons, right? Do you want to use the base font for your buttons? Do you want them to be the base size? So I can mess with, all of that, and I can see the impact of that change right in the button that's in that pattern that we played with, when we first built the page. All right, so now I got buttons done. I got all of my other elements set for their base fonts. Now I can go and change the sizes if I want, or I can add a custom size, right? If I want to go change my font preset sizes, I can do that here, all right? So if I want to add another size, I typically like a little bit smaller font in some locations. So I'm going to do that here, and I can make this, I'll switch it over to rem, and I'll make it 0.85. Okay, so now you can see, what that might look like if I'm choosing this size for a font. And then I can rename it to be extra small. Okay. So now I've got a new font size where if I want to go set my text to extra small, I can do that right here. Okay. I'll keep it on extra small for this. Okay. All that is now saved. All right. So that's it for editing the typography. All right. For colors, same thing you have to be careful of, right? So I have a palette chosen. So I've got the purples going here. If I want to add colors to my palette, and you're typically going to do that, right? I mean, there's just not enough variance in here for me to go build a really bright, brilliant site. So I'm going to add a couple colors to my palette. Real easy, just random. I'm not going too crazy here. So color number 1, add another one, throw in a yellow somewhere, and then we'll go with a green. How's that sound? All right, so a couple other colors here. I can do gradients as well, so you can kind of get into, some different stuff in here. I'm typically just going to add a couple colors into the palette, and then they'll be available for me to go and do whatever I need. Backgrounds, text, however crazy I want to get, I can do it now with a color palette that I've chosen. If you want to go see some, cool ways to go find color palettes and work on that, the site I recommend is called I guess it's pronounced Coolors. So it's COOLORS.co. Okay. And it just shows, some default colors. If I like a color, I can keep it in here, or I can change it. I can remove it. Okay. I can lock it. So there's all kinds of different, shades I can go grab. It's just a cool little interface to go and play around with your colors, all right? You can change the color here, so I can start looking at different ways. And then, if I want, I can just start moving through different color choices. I can hit the space bar, and it's just going to randomly start dropping colors into my palette, okay? So I can lock one, or I can just start switching through them. If I find one I like, I can lock it, and then I can just go look for the other ones. And it's just going to flip through different colors, so you can kind of see them all together. It's just a really kind of creative way to go and build some nice colors together, okay? Not sure there's any rhyme or reason to which colors pop up, but I found that this is a good way for me to kind of go hone in on a couple colors that I think are suitable for the site that I'm building. Okay, so back to our color palette. So now I've got a couple colors in here chosen. Remember the warning from typography. If I go back to my palette now that I've added a bunch of colors, and I go and start changing things without saving anything, and I go back to my defaults, you'll notice that all of my colors are now gone, okay? So, word of caution. If you want to have your custom colors stick around, go save them. It's going random here, nothing too crazy. Add a yellow, orange, there we go. And voila. So now I've got my colors saved. Don't go changing your palettes and then saving again, or you will lose all of your work. Okay. So color palette's done. So we've got all of our colors ready to go. We can play with gradients as well. Okay. Now I can start playing with different elements. So if I want to change the color of our text globally, I can do that from here. Okay. If I want to add a background to every page, I can do that here, right? Typically not going to do that because I want to control the background at the block level more than across the whole site, okay? Links as well, so I can change the color of links. You can see that, we've got a link up here that we put in earlier. Let's go change that red, and you can see that it now shows up red once we make that change, okay? Captions, not worried about. Buttons, That's just going to be the text for your buttons here, right? So if we're going to move that over to a different color, I can do that from this interface. Probably going to keep that on white for now. And then headings. If I want to go change the color of all my headings, I can do that here. The one thing about headings is you can't change the color for your individual headings. All right, so at some point I'm sure that'll pop up, but for now, if you want to change your color headings, like I'll typically have that H5 heading be one of the non-primary colors, then you would have to do that, make that custom. Okay, and we'll clear that because we don't need everything in yellow. And all right, so we've got our colors now selected and saved. Our next option is for the background. So if you want to add a background image, you can do that here. I don't have any files here available, but I don't really recommend having a globally, tiled background image unless, you're going for the MySpace look and feel, or, you want your web page to look like it was developed in 1998, okay? Typically leave background alone, and then shadows. So if you're, one of the newer features in the block editor is the ability to do drop shadows, which I really like because it helps really separate out your page. So if I go up to this group element here, for the pattern that I dropped in, you can see it highlighted. So this is where my shadow would be dropped. I can go and start looking at what those shadows look like, okay? So the way I go and do that is I go flip back over to the block settings or block styles, and I go all the way down, and you'll see you have a menu item down here that says borders and shadows, but I don't have the ability to do anything with the drop shadow. If I go and click on the 3 dots over here, I can add the shadow menu. You'll notice that it doesn't show right away. I've got to scroll down to make it visible. All right, so now it's here. I can add a drop shadow in here. All right, so this is the medium dark shadow, which is nice. Kind of typically how you might go. But if I want to go and edit these or, create some new shadows, I can do that also from the global settings. All right, so I went with the medium dark, I believe. So I can go into each of these and I can set them and change them and take a look at the impact of those, okay? So, lots you can do. I can change the color of them as well. All right, so, the opacity. And then you can stack different shadows on top of each other to get different effects, okay? So it's kind of a cool little interface. I think it's still got a ways to go. But for the most part, I tend to use the shadows. I'm pretty judicious with them, but they're a nice little design element for sure. All right, and then the last is the layout. So before you do anything on the page, before you go build anything, let my experience be your benefit, right? Because I cannot tell you how many times or how many hours I spent trying to figure out why my pages were not spaced correctly because of these 2 settings in the global layout style. All right, so do yourself a favor, set these back to 0. I can control these elements at the block level. I don't need them at the global level. Yes, I may like that spacing between the various lines, but I may not, right? And so I don't want to be constricted or restricted by the global settings. I want to have that control at the page level so that I can make the decision of how much space I want between all of my blocks. All right. I promise you that is going to, at some point in your development, you're going to step away for a couple weeks. You're going to come back into it. You're going to start building a new page, and you're not going to be able to figure out why you have this 10 pixel margin at the top of your page under the menu. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's that block spacing set on the global layout style. Okay. So do yourself a favor, go in right from the beginning and set everything to 0. The other thing you may find with, these settings in even your individual blocks is that they'll look like they're set to 0, but they're not. So the best way to do that, if you're just want to make sure is just double click on them. They'll automatically set themselves to none, and you know that they're set to 0. Okay. The other thing, again, is that sometimes those spaces will show up in your view of the editor, but they won't show up in your view on the regular page. All right. So always go and, before you drive yourself nuts, trying to figure out where this one setting is, make sure that that setting actually exists on the page that you're developing. Okay. So that's it for our global styles at this point, right? So we're ready to now go in and start developing websites. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for video number 1, the global settings. Next video, we're going to dive into the templates and patterns and show you how to set all of those up so you're really good coming out of the gates. There's some things in there that I do that will save you a ton of time and pain, I promise you. So thanks for watching. We'll get you in the next video probably next week, and I look forward to helping everyone become an expert with the block editor.